Today's passage is from the prophet Isaiah, chapter 50, verses 4 to 9a. Holy Week is upon us, and the clouds gather around Jesus at this time of his passion. Today we read an Old Testament passage which doesn't relate the story of Jesus, although when you read it, it might appear that it does. You could even get that impression. When Isaiah wrote of this person, "I gave my back to those who struck me," it sounds so like Jesus, unresisting as the soldiers beat him. No one quite knows who this person that Isaiah was referring to might have been. He was writing hundreds of years before Jesus. It could have been a figure representing the whole people of Israel in all their suffering, or maybe a prophet like Jeremiah who was punished for doing God's will, or even any good person, good suffering innocently at the hands of the wicked. And God forgive us, that happens very often in our world. We call this figure from Isaiah the suffering servant. When Jesus read these texts hundreds of years later, he seems to have found there a better way of fulfilling God's purpose for him than the usual ideas of a Messiah, better than to seize power and become a political leader. So he chose the way of non-resistance, the way of love. And, said St. John, having loved his own, he loved them to the end. He stuck to it, come what may, whatever they did to him. And the inevitable result followed. And what were his crimes? The charges they accused him of were not the root of the matter. They were a way of manipulating him into a death sentence. His real crimes were to expose hypocrisy and corruption, to show up the influential and the powerful, revealing their weaknesses, to pay more attention to the poor and the needy than to the wealthy and the authorities, to remind people of what life is really all about and what God is really like, love and compassion. To be, in fact, a good person, reflecting accurately the nature of God in his words and actions. To be an open channel for the Spirit of God to pour through him with life-giving power. Such liberties could not be permitted from an upstart nobody out of a backwater with no credentials. He had to be taught a lesson. And they did kill him. But, as Isaiah said, "He who vindicates me is near." And the mistake they made is revealed all too soon, just 3 days later. "All of them," said Isaiah, "will wear out like a garment. The moth will eat them up." Where are those enemies today? But Jesus is loved and worshipped all around the world as millions follow him through this week towards the cross. And as we walk this week with him, he is indeed able for all of us, millions, you and me, he is able to sustain the weary with a word.